I'm Julian Hummer, and I read When Breath Becomes Fresh Air by Kalanithi. So, I chose this book because he's a neurosurgeon, and I've always been super interested in neuroscience. I've read a few books on it, and I wanted to read from a neurosurgeon's perspective on how the human brain works and why it does the way it does, and why our personalities are the way they are. Anyway, so after reading the first 50 pages, I was super happy with my choice because he dives into the whole works of the human brain. He details a lot of really interesting subjects and a lot of complicated terms, but he does it in a way where I can understand them, as well as writing about his upbringing and his story, especially with being a doctor in residency. Um, After I finished the book, I had a super strong appreciation for doctors and all that they go through. I had no idea how hard residency was, but I guess he was at the hospital almost like every day, and it seems so challenging, especially with the work itself, and as well as doing it all the time. Um, yeah, so I really appreciate all the things that doctors do that you really don't think about on a daily basis. And going into one of the coolest things I've learned, he taught a lot about how being a doctor and having a home life is really hard. And I thought it was super interesting because, once again, didn't really think about how all that work that they put in at the hospital really impacts their own personal life. He had a really hard time separating time for his wife and everything besides work because residency took all of his time up, and it was him trying to find a balance, which I thought was really interesting, and it was kind of cool to see how he tried to work things out. But unfortunately, he found out he had cancer towards the end of his residency, and that goes into the struggle of this book. So he had he was trying to, not think about it because he thought that he may have cancer because he went through the symptoms, and he's like, I have these symptoms, but I don't want to, face that I have cancer yet. So it was kind of a weird transition for him to become from the doctor to the patient, and it was kind of an uncomfortable transition for him. So he had a hard time also with giving up a lot of the things that he loved, and his wife was pregnant, and then so he felt like he was going to miss out on his daughter because it ended up being a terminal illness, and he passed away, unfortunately. And it was really hard for him, and he was faced with life and death, and the also morality of being a doctor. And being a doctor, he was faced with death every single day and having to make really hard decisions, and he tried to find what death meant and what life meant, and if life was worth living. So he dove into that really deep within the book and went through a lot of that stuff. And my Reach Beyond connection, I read an article called What Would a Good Doctor Do? Reflections of the Ethics of Medicine by Ronald McKenzie. And he kind of went into the obligations that doctors face for making hard decisions for a patient's life and their well-being, as well as their families and the doctors themselves. He kind of went into the thought process, and that it's not all cut and dry, and that you have to use common sense and your own morality to make these really hard decisions, to further a patient, or to know when enough is enough, and nothing else can be done. So that connected really well with When Breath Becomes Fresh Air, because he talked about that all the time. He was always reflecting on morality and why he got to make those really hard decisions, and he also, like, when he was faced with death, like, he had the perspective of a patient and how those doctors were making the decisions for him as well. So he had a lot to do with the morality of, like, doctor decisions as well as being a patient and making those hard decisions as well. That's pretty much it. Thank you. I hope you liked it.